What's going on, Fight Night fans? We are here for UFC London this Saturday. We got a hell of a card ahead of us. My name is Proto. I am one of the hosts along here with my other guy, KevDog Emperor G. How we doing, bud?
Oh man, living the dream, happy, healthy, man. The sun is shining, can't complain. Was an absolutely beautiful card last week, and man, this is gonna be so fun. You already know that O2 is gonna be rocking this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, if it's anything like the last time we had an event there at O2, it's going to be absolutely insane. I mean, we saw it last week in Long Island. I was lucky enough to be there, but when you get these raucous crowds in there, it's like finishes after finish after finish after finish. So, hopefully for our sake, we're seeing some more of that. I know this first fight we're going to talk about, I know you're hoping for a finish. I know which side it's on as well. I want to shout out our guy, Dan, who couldn't make it today. He will be with us next week. Don't you guys worry. But, before we get into this, a little recap about UFC Long Island last week, we did okay. If any of you guys watched this show, you got us all saying that we're going to squad ride Matt Schnell by submission. It was 8-1 at the time. And there you have it. One of the most epic photos, one of the most epic comebacks in UFC history. I was lucky enough to be there live to witness it. I told you, Kev, it's probably the best bet I've ever cashed in my life that, I was there live. I got to see that sort of comeback. And mind you, I was there when my Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, and I had a bet on that too. And I think this one takes the cake over. That's how exciting it was. Just, a fight that you could only ask for such circumstances coming on for him to overcome what he did. He was basically knocked down on his feet 6 different times and then, landed one of his own, got it back, got on top, and then the rest was history.
Yeah, man. I mean, the adversity, the resiliency this man showed was off the chain, man. I mean, this guy just has pure heart, like you said, man. For one, that you were in attendance, so the exhilaration is probably times 10 from what we were seeing on a screen. But my goodness, you said it, man. He was getting pieced up on the feet and somehow found a way. Last week we were talking about this fight, and I remember asking you guys. I was like, I'm looking at the odds. I'm like, okay. Let me ask these guys and think, okay, what do they think that these odds are, right? I'm like, okay, what do you guys think that Matt Schnell by sub is? And I remember Dan was like, plus 300 ish, and you're like, maybe like plus 450. I don't remember, but long story short, we read between the lines. We saw incredible value in a guy who has a pretty solid submission game. He just finds a way. I think he had 7 or 8 submissions on his record, and an 8-1, it was a no brainer. It's just one of those numbers games, man, where this line should have been +4, +500, in my opinion. And the fact that we got 8-1 was truly a blessing. Of course, it was a squad ride. We were all going lit in the Discord. So, but we're going to continue to build on this, right? We're not going to get too high on our highs, too low on our lows, and we're just going to keep building on what we got going here.
Yeah, and honestly, that best bet from last week kind of segues into this first fight a little bit, right? I mean, we have one guy on this side in Paul Craig who will just get the most ridiculous comeback submission wins anyone could ever hope for. I mean, just look at his past few fights. Nikita Krillov, he was losing the first 4.5 minutes of that fight for the most part, and then he somehow found that triangle. And then you look at his fight against Magomed Ankalaev, right, where he got the buzzer beater submission with 1 second left in the fight. The Jamal Hill's fight is a little bit different because he dominated that one from the jump. But, Paul Craig's a guy who, if you're going to bet him, you might as well take that submission prop. I mean, all 16 of his wins are by finish, 13 of which I believe are submission. And then you got Volkan Oezdemir, who I think you said is 2-5 in his last 7, if I'm not mistaken. And he is the favorite in this one right now, sitting at -150. That number has been steaming down a little bit, but he's another guy that finishes, right? Majority of his fights are by finish. And if you look at the way both of these guys lose, most of the time it's inside the distance, right? And where you have this over-under sitting at under 2.5 at -220, I personally see a little bit of value here, before we get into the sides on each guy. But I don't see a way this one goes distance. I mean, I think we have seen a little bit in Ozdemir's last few fights. He tends to play a little bit safer than normal, but it's impossible to play it safe against a guy like Paul Craig who just brings it to you for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, all 16 of his wins are inside the distance. And, there's this whole narrative, oh, Paul Craig is this fluke. He's a fluke this, he's a fluke that. At what point are we going to say, okay, maybe this guy isn't a fluke, right? I mean, you're talking about a knockout over the number 11 guy in the world, Jamal Hill. You're talking about a submission over the current number 4 guy in Magomed Ankalaev. You're talking about a submission over a guy in Nikita Krillov, who we just saw last time out. I mean, the list goes on, right? Like you can even talk about the knockout over the former champion Shogun Rua. I don't care, even though he was washed up. Like, at what point are we like, okay, he just finds a will to find a way? You know what I'm saying? And what I love about Paul Craig is he just has this aura, this confidence about him, where he he just believes in his craft, and you know, I just love what I see. I love what I see in this man. You know, he just finds a way. It may not be pretty, but he finds it. And a guy in Volkan Oezdemir, man, look, you know, in 2017 he came in, made a splash, was even the UFC newcomer of the year 5 years ago, and had a little run. But then once he started to get into that topper tier of competition, we kind of saw what happened, and that's reflected on his record. You know, he's 2-5, you know, in his last 7. I don't look at this guy as one that is one of the more athletic guys in the division. Stays semi-flat footed. I just, you know, I think what's the biggest thing for me with Volkan, number one, he has pretty short arms. I think he's got like a 75 or 76 inch reach. And the biggest thing is I feel as though he lacks that urgency. He lacks that aggression. And once he has that moment where his opponent lands a takedown or a knockdown or a solid punch where he's semi-compromised, you can tell by the style of his fighting that he kind of like loses track. Like he'll start the fight pushing forward, and then once he gets clocked or something, you'll see him kind of be more passive. And, you know, I was watching an interview with Paul Craig. It was about a month ago. And, you know, some may say that hiring a sports psychologist is a red flag. But personally, I see it as being a professional and, you know, putting all your eggs in the basket and finding a way to succeed. And he talks about this sports psychologist and this theory of visualization, where every morning he wakes up at 4 a.m., you know, the house is pitch quiet. And, you know, he just visualizes back in his head every single morning, you know, how he portrays this fight going. And what he is saying is he's gonna take him down. He's gonna ground and pound. Volkan is gonna turn his back, and he's gonna find the rear naked choke. You know, what I love about Paul Craig is you just know he's gonna fight for your money. And I feel like with Oezdemir, we all know it's just that path, that one path, right? It's that one path. He's looking for the knockout. And, you know, if Craig can stay elusive early, if he can avoid that big shot, I really feel like he's going to either take over or it's just a matter of time where he finds that submission. And, you know, I looked at this line and really just questionable to me because, you know, Volkan, again, 2-5 in his last 7. Craig is unbeaten in his last 6. And I bring this up all the time, Matt, and it's so key when handicapping this sport is the psychology of these fighters. And you have a guy in Volkan who's already got a shot at the belt. You know, he's 2-5 in the UFC. He just, you know, how much hunger does he really have left? You know, how much more motivation, how much more gas in the tank? And a guy in Paul, man, he's coming in, you know, head first, right? Like a steam train just riding through, man. He just finds a way, man, and he's confident. He knows what's in front of him. He knows what to expect. He realizes that Oezdemir has those dynamites in his hands, and if he can stay elusive early, he's going to find that submission either in the first or second round.
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely to play devil's advocate here, since, you know, everyone is getting your view on the Craig side for the most part. I know it's one of your conviction plays of the week. So just to give it a different side of the story here on Oezdemir, you know, someone like Paul Craig, their game plan, obviously, he mentioned he wants to wrestle you, take you down, and then get his way to the submission, right? But when you look at the numbers a little bit, Craig only lands his takedowns at 26%. You're going against someone in Oezdemir here who has 80% takedown defense, right? And as you mentioned, he's really fighting the top guys. I mean, in his last 3 fights, he fought Magomed Ankalaev, Yuri Prohashka in his UFC debut, and then Alexander Rakic. And then before that, Ilir Latifi, and then Dominic Reyes, Anthony Smith, Daniel Cormier, right, for the belt. So this guy Oezdemir, he's not taking easy fights, right? He's fighting the top dogs in the division, and he has had success against them. I mean, he beat Rakic. He beat Ilir Latifi. He should have beaten Dominic Reyes by decision there in that split decision. I know that he was salty about it. I think he won the fight as well. But, you know, when you're looking at this level of competition, those numbers tend to stack up a little bit higher, right? That 80% takedown defense is a true 80% takedown defense, right? So someone like Craig, they're going to need to get that takedown. And it's easier said than done, I should say. But I know you mentioned that Oezdemir might not, you know, have anything left in the tank, but the guy's 32 years old, right? He's still very young in terms of the sport. I mean, look at the graphic here. Paul Craig is 6 years his elder. So, you know, in terms of handicapping, you and I do take that into consideration a little bit here. And, you know, Oezdemir, I think that he could gain something from facing that top competition, being so close, right? He lost a decision to Ankalaev, but he won a round off Ankalaev. He got knocked out by Yuri Prohashka, but that first round was very competitive. I don't even know. He may have won on the scorecard of that first round there. He beat Alexander Rakic, who we all thought was going to be the next person fighting for the belt, right? And then he should have beaten Dominic Reyes. So it's like all these different fighters he's stacking up against. He's doing well against them, right? It's not like he's doing poorly. But one thing of concern with me here, I think, with Paul Craig's side is that obviously he finds himself in a lot of danger a lot of times. You know, to his credit, he gets out of it. He comes out on top. But someone like Oezdemir, you have to imagine they're not going to follow him down to the mat, right? I mean, Oezdemir, not necessarily a submission guy. He's 1 on his professional record, 2 losses by submission. So he's definitely going to be a little bit more careful following Craig to the ground there. And I think if it stays standing, you know, Paul Craig isn't, you know, a great striker by any means. And I think if Oezdemir sticks to his game plan, because Oezdemir is a counter fighter, right? He's not looking to you know, throw first. He's looking to pressure you and make you throw something where he can counter that. So if Oezdemir can move forward, keep Craig on his back foot here, I think there's a little bit of room for concern on how Craig lands that takedown, ultimately gets to that submission. But I think Oezdemir, for the most part, he could stay on the outside, you know, pick his punches, stay out of range of the takedown, right? So I think that sort of explains that minus 150 line a little bit. It's a tough fight for me to bet because I'm not overly impressed with Oezdemir. In the same right, Craig finds himself in a little bit too much danger for my liking to back him. I mean, obviously, as a bettor of his, you're very happy right now, right? You've been cashing multiple underdog tickets in a row. And, you know, it just seems like one of those spots here where it's like, how many times can this guy get out of danger, right? It's almost like the bus has to come to a stop eventually. So just from a devil's advocate standpoint, I want to give that side of the Oezdemir, you know, minus 150, you know, why someone might be inclined to bet him or bet against Craig here. So, you know, I know this is your conviction play, Paul Craig. You're on fire with conviction plays. I believe it's like 8 of the last 9 conviction plays have hit. So I'm not one that's going to walk into the fire against you there. So this pick's all yours. I'm just, you know, trying to keep it from both sides.
No. I appreciate that. And that's what the show is all about, is understanding both perspectives. And for the record, Paul Craig is 34, not 38. So he only has that two age advantage here. But, you know, you said it well, man. I mean, Volkan does have an 80% takedown defense. And, you know, watching the tape, he does have really good technique and stuff in that takedown. But, you know, again, it really comes down to the psychology of it, man. I mean, at 2-5 in the UFC, even if he gets a win here, I don't know, man. I just don't see it. I don't see it. I feel as though, even though, you know, Craig may have some deficiencies on the feet, I just feel like he has more paths to victory, man. You know, this man I still feel like he's continuing to evolve, right? I mean, this is a now or never spot for him, right? You know, and again, I firmly believe that he's continuing to evolve. Some may say that that's not true because we haven't truly seen that in his previous, you know, fights, you know, just because it was such a weird style. What's that?
We saw a glimpse of that evolution versus Hill. That was the one fight he was never in danger. He was in the driver's seat the whole time.
Right. Yeah. I guess my point is, like, versus the Krillov fight, right, where he was on the ground so early, you know, it's really hard to take a measure of how he was on the feet, right? Because that fight literally was barely on the feet at all. And, you know, again, this is a now or never spot for Craig. You know, he knows what type of run he's on. And I know that he's been improving his striking. And again, he knows what's coming. You can even make an argument that he has seen bigger power punchers, you know, in the UFC. Mind you, they didn't end the way that it should have in Alonzo Menfield and Khalil Roundtree, who I firmly believe are stronger hitters than Volkan. But, you know, I just watch Volkan fight, man, and I just see the lack of athleticism. I see the blitzes that he does, and I'm just not impressed. And, you know, if he goes through that blitz, I just feel like Craig's going to get that level change and take him down. And, you know, I just really love this spot. You know, I mean, 16 wins, 16 finishes. You know, Craig is a sniper. He's a killer. You know what I'm saying? When I say sniper and a killer, it doesn't have to be on the feet. It can be on the ground. This isn't a boxing match. So, you know, I love Craig. I'm hoping we see him in that stare down with the blue face paint, man. You know, in England, you know, the Scandinavian fighter, you know, that narrative that I love with this fight in England, you know, strengthening the England and Scandinavian fighters. So, and, you know, Scotland, Denmark, and so on and so forth. So Sweden. So yeah, man, this is going to be so incredibly fun. Number 8 versus number 9. Cannot wait for this fight.
Yeah, and it's to be noted, Paul Craig's been training with Tom Aspinall, so he's getting great work in. I know he's been training primarily with heavyweights in this camp, and, you know, someone like Oezdemir, he's not a speedy guy, so training with those heavyweights might actually be, like, a good bump for Paul Craig here. But, like you mentioned, there's definitely ways for both guys to win. I'm with you a little bit. Oezdemir lately, for the most part, he looks a little sluggish out there, not like he's necessarily, he doesn't really bring it. And I think you put it best. Like he kind of is just like there, plods forward, and then when he doesn't get his way, it just starts moving back. He'll let you piece him up a little bit. So it's definitely not a side I want to be on laying juice. I'm with you. If you tell me conviction play on Craig, I'll go conviction play on Craig. But I like that under as a parlay piece. Under 2.5 minus 220. Throw in a few parlays, you'll make some money. And speaking of parlay pieces, I think we covered that one up. This one's probably like the biggest parlay piece in the entire card. And, if you're taking this one, you're just plugging your nose. You're like, just hopefully this one wins. And that's Meatball Molly McCann going off at minus 400 versus Hannah Goldie. Molly McCann obviously coming off that huge spinning back fist knockout in the O2 her last time out there in front of that raucous crowd. And Hannah Goldie's coming off a submission win of her own. She's 2-2 in the UFC. Not overly impressive. I know a lot of people think Meatball Molly runs through this matchup. I don't think there's anywhere where Goldie necessarily is better than Meatball Molly. It's just at this point, minus 400, right? How do you even play that?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the first off, credit to Molly, because that knockout that she had in the O2 back in March, I believe, was one of the craziest women's knockouts I've ever seen. Quite frankly, like that spinning elbow, right? You just don't see that like in women's mixed martial arts. It's just a thing of beauty. Obviously with this fight being in the O2, with the energy, with that knockout, there's no doubt that this line has so much recency bias included into it. To say Molly is minus 400 here, I mean, even if you're throwing her a bone, it's like doesn't make sense to me, right? I mean, Molly, before that big knockout, right? I mean, no one looked at this woman and said, oh my goodness, she could make a run in the UFC, right? She could be a top contender. That's just not the case. And, look, with this fight being in the O2, the UFC isn't going to give her a woman that they expect is going to beat her, right? But look, I mean, Goldie is coming off of a first round submission, whether it's versus a bone or not. Again, it's that psychology piece where maybe she believes that she can come in here and spoil the party. I mean, she lands over 6 strikes per minute. She stays pretty active. I would say that the chances of this going to a decision are quite high, to say the least. But, I'm with you, Matt. I mean, Goldie, she's nothing crazy. I haven't seen anything in her tape to think that she's going to make a splash in the UFC. But this all comes down to the fact that this line for me is more or less like a minus 250, and somewhere in that range, minus 275 ish. So to say this is a parlay piece for Molly, it's just a values game, man. It's just you're not getting that value there. You're taking too much of a risk on a woman that just doesn't have that it factor. You know what I'm saying? And I get that she's 5-3 in the UFC, but for me, this is just a narrative where. I mean, look, Molly should get this done, but I really wouldn't be surprised if Goldie pulls off this upset. Like I really, really wouldn't. It's a tough task going into that arena and have a crowd against you. But again, I don't love what I see out of Molly. Speaking of Molly, that extraordinarily cringy scene when she ran into the octagon when Patty won. I mean,
come on, that was great.
Oh gosh,
people wanted. That's what the people wanted there.
I had to put a blanket over my head when I saw that, but I don't really have anything betting wise for this fight. This is just a huge fade. I understand why this is on the main card, right, with Patty. But it's just not a betting spot that I want to attract. I think that obviously this is a very juicy card from top to bottom. A lot of big favorites, but I think that we can definitely say that there are some big favorites on this card that would be a safer parlay piece than Molly McCann.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue it definitely. Like you said, she's 5-3 in the UFC. Molly McCann is, but one play I'm looking at for this one, Molly McCann by decision minus 165. That value. I think you're getting that minus 400 chopped all the way down, and this is a woman who, for the most part, goes to decision. If she's going to win, it's going to be by decision. That knockout. As sick as it was, it's been like 4 years since her last finish in professional fighting. So Hannah Goldie, she's tough in her own right. I don't really see anyone finishing her. When it comes to strength, I think you got to give the advantage to Goldie. Just looking at this graphic here, I mean, all it takes is the eye test with this one. But I think that's a good play is McCann by decision -165, because I know you hate to say this, right? The fact that this fight's taking place in London, if these rounds are close, it's going to Molly McCann, right? I mean, last time they were over there, Elise Reed fought McKenna, right? And when the judges gave McKenna the score, and it was like such a clear and obvious, 3-0 win for Elise Reed there. So these judges might get a little bit rogue here in London. So if this one goes to decision, you have to imagine that McCann is going to come out on top there. And I think it's likely to go to decision. I don't see either one finishing it. I think you could take a few plays here if you want to parlay them. Fight to start round 3 is like -350. I think that's a great parlay piece. You could take the over 2.5 rounds at -255. You can take the fight goes to distance at -225. Like, these are all good bets that you could throw into a parlay. And then I think if you're going to play this one straight, you got to take Meatball Molly by decision at -165, right? I just really don't see a way where Hannah Goldie's going to be able to, grapple effectively against Molly McCann, get on top, land takedowns, because I really think that's her only path to actually securing a victory in the eyes of these judges. I think Molly McCann, we saw her in her last fight, threw a lot of volume, right? And for the most part, she was there in round 3 too. She didn't necessarily gas herself out. And you have to imagine with those emotions, with the amount of volume that you kicked off, right? Like, if there was ever a time for her to gas out and lose in the 3rd round, I would imagine that was it, right? I think now she's a little bit more acclimated to the environment there of the O2 Arena with the crowd, being on the main card and a huge card like this. I think that Meatball Molly just has a lot of ways that she could get this one done. I think -165 on the decision prop is, too good to be true. I don't think there's any other way you could play this one. And like I said, if you're looking to parlay some plays, fight to start round 3 -350, I think is a great way to start with a leg right there. And even taking this one to go the distance -225. I just don't see how either of those lose. I actually had in Meatball Molly's last fight, I had Meatball Molly by finish there because I wasn't impressed with Elena Carolina. I thought she was there to get hit. I thought there was an angle for her to lose within the distance. And, no one was happier than me when Meatball Molly landed that spinning back fist or elbow, whatever it was. So, I just don't see this one not going the distance. And if it does, like I said, I don't see the judges not giving it to McCann.
Listen, I got a spicy prop for you, man. So Goldie obviously coming off of a 1st-round submission, right? So you and it was a pretty slick armbar. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's nice armbar.
It was very slick. Goldie by submission 14-1 on DK. No, not willing to entertain it. Just a little sprinkle.
That was her only submission win in her career, right? So it's like it took her how many tries? That was her 7th professional fight, and then she got the submission win.
Yeah, I mean, that's sporting what 60, 50, 15, 20%. I don't know. Molly McCann has been submitted in the UFC. I just, it's one of those things that line is super, super wide. I'd put it more like 8 or 10-1, to be honest, but 14-1.
The reason being is because she's such a big underdog to begin with. So that method, you're narrowing down your path there on an already large underdog. So, the line kind of makes a little bit of sense, but you got to see who Molly McCann got submitted by. She got submitted by Jillian Robertson in her first UFC fight. So, it's not something, it's not a knock. You can't give Molly a knock on her record for that loss there, especially in a UFC debut. Jillian Robertson is an OG for the most part. So, pretty gross fight. I don't think it's going to be entertaining by any means. Maybe Meatball Molly will do something to make it so. She'll yell a little bit. She'll drink a beer in between rounds. Who knows? But, those are my plays there. I really don't see how any of them lose, and that's usually like the final words of someone before they get murdered. So let's just hope I'm right there.
This isn't going to be very, very entertaining. But hey, if Molly, pulls this out and after she wins, goes into the crowd, someone hands her a shoey and she chugs a beer, then it'll make it all worth it.
It's what's going to happen. She's the people's main event there. But enough of that fight. I think we're on to a great one here, right? You got Nikita Krillov fighting the return of Alexander Gustafson, the Mauler. This guy has been in some absolute wars throughout the years. He retired 2 years ago, coming back to the UFC now in UFC London. There's always that doubt when you're backing someone who has retired and they have come back into the promotion, or someone that is leaning on retirement. Example that comes to mind, Frankie Edgar is planning his retirement fight, right, in November, going to bet against him. It's very simple. Someone's got 1 foot in, 1 foot out against someone that is fully submerged in that pool. You got to go with the guy that does it for a living, that is fully invested. Gustafson, I think he's fully invested. You know, he did retire, you know, with everything I just said, he retired, but it seems like he's back, right? You know, it's hard to tell because you're looking at, you know, social media footage or training footage from the gym where everyone looks like an all-star in the gym. But, you know, this guy's training out of a great gym. He's got, you know, great guys within that gym. And, you know, I think at his highest level, he's clearly better than Nikita Krillov is at his highest level. It's just a matter of if Gustafson could get back there after all these years. You know, it's been a while since we've seen him even get a win in the UFC. It's been 5 years, but that win was over Glover Teixeira, right? And then before that, his win prior is against Jan Blachowicz. So it's like you have this weird dichotomy with Alexander Gustafsson where he has great wins. He's looked great. Even his losses are great. His loss to John Jones is great. His loss to Daniel Cormier is great. But then you look at his last time out versus Fabricio Verdum, looked horrible. You look at his time out against Anthony Smith. I actually think he was winning that fight up until he got caught with the submission towards the end, but he almost just gave up once it got to the ground. And Nikita Krillov definitely is going to look to take this one to the mat. I mean, we saw it in his game plan last time out versus Paul Craig, someone who you should not go to the mat with, right? And he was willing to follow him down there, and he initiated that sequence himself. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. It's not one I'm willing to get in front of. I do think that, you know, part of me says, you know, take the value on Gustafsson as the underdog here. You know, Krillov really isn't all that great, but, you know, it's just hard to argue, right? It's hard to argue either side in this case. I mean, Krillov, 25 finishes out of 27 wins, right? I mean, 7 of his 9 losses by finish, but you have someone in Gustafsson who, for the most part, isn't looking to finish. He has 11 knockouts, right, on his 18 professional wins, but I don't think he possesses any real knockout power, especially in this part of his career. You know, he's looking to touch you up. He's looking to get his points on the outside and pretty much stay there for the most part. So it's hard to bet this one inside the distance. It's hard to bet this one on either side. So for me, it's like question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. I'll watch, you know, I'll gladly watch. If I'm up a little bit, I'll sprinkle some on here for like Gustafsson by decision maybe, but that's about it.
Yeah, man. Look, I have so much respect for Gustafsson, right? I mean, you're talking about that history with John Jones, and you know those fights were some of the best title defenses we've ever seen from John. I mean, Gustafsson truly put up a fight there. And again, I have respect for him because like that first title shot was in 2013, right? He you know, he went back into the gym, went back to the drawing board, and worked his way back to another title shot, just for him to crap the bed. And, you know, he retired in 2019 and said, you know, word for word, I don't have what it takes anymore. And, you know, I understand the 2-year layoff and, you know, maybe he has a little bit more juice left, but man, I just don't see it, man. I feel like this is just him coming in here to collect a 6-figure paycheck and go off into the sunset, man. Like I'm not, for the record, I'm not very high on Krillov. I never really have been. He has that intensity, but he doesn't have that IQ. Like I feel like he looks good until he just makes boneheaded mistakes. And, you know, it's really hard for me to get behind a guy like that. You know, in Krylov's defense, you know, he should be the aggressor in this fight. I kind of look at this, you know, with Gustafsson where he was just one of those guys on the come up, you know, 10 years ago that I don't want to say put Europe on the map with mixed martial arts, but I do feel like he's, you know, one of those guys from that continent that really elevated the sport. I really do. And a guy in Krylov, you know, you've got to imagine that he took record of that. You know, he witnessed, you know, Gustafsson's reign, you know, back in the day. And I think this is one of those things for Krylov where he's excited for this one, man. He knows what's in front of him. You know, of course, Gustafsson is 35. What I do like about Krylov, though, is he does a really good job of mixing in the punches, kicks to takedowns. You know what I'm saying? It's a very smooth transition. And I think Gustafsson is there to be taken down. And quite frankly, if he does get taken down, I have a really hard time believing that he's going to get back up with ease. You know, I think that Krylov is going to have that strength advantage, that power advantage. You know, I understand that Krylov has lost 3 of his last 4, but I think this is a really good spot, you know, to get a win back in the column there. And, you know, of course, he is familiar with that O2 arena, right? He just fought there a few months back. So, And I believe he actually fought there. This might be his third time in the O2. I'll have to double check that, but I know he obviously fought a few months ago. And I just think that this is a way for him to get back on track here. Again, I have a lot of respect for Gustafson, but I just don't know what he can really bring to the table here that has me convinced that he's going to cover Krillov. It just seems like Krilov's going to be one more step ahead in every facet of this matchup, at least at this point in the career.
Yeah, right. I mean, as a bettor, though, there's so many question marks surrounding this one that it's very hard to get a gauge on it because, we've seen what Gustafson is capable of. We've seen what Krillov is capable of. And you mentioned it, Kryllov's fight IQ, I mean, we saw it on display in the last fight. It's not great. And if his game plan is to get this one to the ground, I mean, Gustafson, over his career, 83% takedown defense against those killers. I mean, it's kind of like the first fight we were talking about with Oezdemir. That's a real 83% takedown defense. He's fighting Glover Teixeira, Fabricio Verdum. He's fighting Anthony Smith, John Jones, Daniel Cormier. 83% takedown defense. Insane. Krillov lands at like 36, 35% on his takedown. So, if Gustafson could, keep this one on the feet, I don't see how Krillov stands a chance because Gustafson's taller. He's got the length advantage. He's obviously the better striker of the two. And, I didn't think in his last few fights I was watching, it didn't look like there was a big speed drop off per se. It almost looked like a mental sort of block where like, how much could I lend myself to the sport anymore? Like, was he fully committed at those times? Like, is that why he retired? Like, there's all these questions, right? And, I'm not one to play guessing games with my money. I like to know what's going to happen with it, right? So for that reason, I will be watching this one. Like I said, if there's any play I take in this, it's going to be Gustafson by decision probably. If I'm up a little bit, I think it's sitting around +4, +500 on the line there. So, any other way, I think if you're on the Krillov side, you got to take Krillov by finish here, whether it be ground and pound or a submission, club and sub, whatever it may be. But, it's a tough one to bet here.
It is. And I have this weird feeling that, like, if Gustafson does pull this out, I think that he's going to hang up the gloves, man. I think that, like, deep down, he wants to go out on top, like, with a win. I don't know, man. And like you said, man, Gustafson is going to be the lengthier guy. But one thing that I do like about Krillov, which I had mentioned, is he does a really good job of evading those strikes. Like he's not easy to touch. He has a like karate, like unorthodox style. He's absorbing, well under 2.5 strikes a minute, which is pretty solid. But yeah, no, this is a big fade for me. I just think there's so many unknown variables on the Gustafson side. I get that he was 1 foot in, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. He said that he doesn't know if he has what it takes anymore. But, who knows? Maybe these last 2 years he just buckled down and, is telling himself that he's going to come out here and show that, maybe he still has a little bit of juice left in him. But, yeah, this is just one of those. We'll just enjoy it for what it is. And hopefully it'll be fun. I have a feeling that it could be kind of boring, but Krillov is so aggressive. But it is going to be fun. Gustafson's a legend in my opinion. I just think that reign, in the 2010s was pretty cool. And hopefully it doesn't get the Tony Ferguson treatment in this spot.
Let's hope not. And just one more point, when it comes to his inactivity since he last fought, it's not like Kryllov's been very active. He only has 2 fights since Gustafson's last fight. So, one could make the argument that, you'd rather spend that time in the gym, right? Taking less damage, sharpening your skills a little bit more. So it just leads us back to the initial point where, how much of the unknown do you have to, take into account here in this matchup? And for the most part, I'd say like 80% of this is unknown. And the other 20% is what we know their fight style is within the octagon. So can't hammer home the point enough times, right? That stay away. This isn't one you need to bet on. I think we have like 16 fights, 14 fights on this fight card. You don't have to bet them all. This is one of those where you just watch as a fan. If you grew up a fan of the UFC in the 2010s, admire Gustafson for being back in there, being an OG of the sport. That's really all you could do in this spot here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in regards to the betting wise, just nothing there. Just know we're going to find some great opportunities elsewhere. And I know you mentioned earlier is going to be a trickier card, but man, I feel confident, man. I know with our expertise of the sport, we're going to find a way to come out on top in the green.
Yeah, and speaking of tricky, I know this next fight coming up, you and I have clashed heads a little bit, not necessarily on the side, but on the method here.
Mm-hmm.
And this next matchup, you know, I mentioned Meatball Molly's the people's main event. No. Patty the Baddie Pimblett is the main event of this card, whether you like it or not. Everyone's going to be in there, oh, Patty the Baddie. And it's going to be nuts. It's like the exact scene you want as an MMA fan. Watching that walk out, if he gets his hand raised, that place is going to go nuts. He takes on Jordan Levitt here. Probably his toughest test to date inside the UFC octagon for the most part. You could argue whether or not it's his toughest test to date, you know, with Cage Warriors and everything being said there. But, you know, Jordan Levitt firmly believes that Patty Pimblett is not his toughest test. He said Trey Ogden would ragdoll Patty Pimblett. He said Claudio Puelles would sub Patty Pimblett. So, you know, these guys were talking a lot of trash. Jordan Levitt said he wants to go in there, fight him, beat him, twerk on him, and leave. Patty Pimblett says, I want to teabag him while he's laying unconscious on the canvas. He said he wants to make him the first person to shit himself in the octagon, which he was corrected. It won't be the first person to make them shit themselves in the octagon. Justine Kish holds that record in her advantage there. But, you know, so much going on with this matchup. I think both guys highly skilled on the mat. It's going to be one of those instances maybe where, you know, they're so neutralized on the mat that this one stays standing. Obviously, if that's the case, you have to give the advantage to Patty Pimblett here because Jordan Levitt has shown very little to be, you know, worrisome of on the defense if he's striking because he doesn't really have much to offer you there, whereas Patty Pimblett's going to throw spinning attacks, he's going to throw kicks, he's going to come at you with those full-blown blitzes, and it's going to be an interesting one. And I know Patty Pimblett mentioned as well that, you know, this is Jordan Levitt's first time fighting outside the UFC Apex, and what environment to come into, right, in your first time out of it with fans in the O2 in London, fighting a guy like Patty Pimblett. Does that take a toll on him? I don't know. Levitt seems like a very level-headed kind of guy. Yeah. You know, I told you earlier in this week, I really like the over in this matchup. I know it's a sweaty one whenever you're taking the over in a Patty Pimblett fight. He's gone under in both of his fights so far. I think both first-round finishes. And the over-under in this one is set at 2.5. You get the alternate round of 1.5 over at -145. I think that's my play in this one. I've been taking that -145. For the sole reason that I think that Levitt is going to keep this one in the clinch wherever he can. I think, you know, Patty's striking style, he likes to blitz in. It's not necessarily technical for the most part, especially when he has that crowd behind him. He just feels invincible. He's going to blitz at you. He's going to throw, you know, punch after punch after punch. And I don't think Levitt's dumb enough to stand there and let himself get hit or try to trade back and, you know, be this bravado type of guy. I think that his game plan is he's going to try to time a level change. He's going to try to clinch him up against the fence. I see a lot of this fight taking place on the mat. I see a lot of it taking place against the fence. And, you know, if that's the case, I think that both guys have certain advantages in certain spots. You know, Levitt is very good on the ground. He didn't get submitted by Claudio Puelles, which very few could say in the UFC. I mean, Puelles is just subbing everyone that gets in his way. And, you know, Patty, for the most part, he's a grappler. I know I mentioned this to you. A lot of people regard him as a striker due to his, you know, debut in the UFC. He got that stellar knockout. But for the most part, you know, you look throughout his career, knockouts, you know, I think he has like 6 of them on his record or something like that. But it's not too common for Patty. You know, for the most part, he's going to try to grapple you, take this one to the ground, try to work a submission. I really don't think Levitt is there to be submitted. I don't think Levitt's going to be able to get submissions off of his own. And for that reason, I really like the over. I don't see ground and pound taking place in this fight as well. If anything, it's going to be Patty catching him with something on the feet. And if that doesn't happen within the first 2 minutes of the fight, I don't think it happens, you know, until way later on, until, you know, some of these grappling exchanges turn out a little sloppy. They get back to the feet. So over 1.5 at -145. I'm really liking that value there. I know I'm probably going to be on an island taking it over in this fight, but, you know, I like that's a bigger cage too for Levitt, more room to move around. But, you know, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one.
You know who Patty Pimblett reminds me of? He reminds me of Fat Bastard from Austin Powers.
What?
Did you see this man like a month after his last fight? This man put on nearly over 50 pounds. It actually blows my mind that he's able to cut that amount of weight like that.
And he looks fucking good.
He looks great.
He looks great. I need his workout plan, his diet plan. I want to lose 50 pounds in like 8 weeks.
I mean, it's wild. And I'll tell you what, if he wants to keep doing that, that's really going to take a toll on his organs. My goodness, because that truly is not the way to go. But how can you not love this guy, Paddy Pimblett, man? Paddy the Baddy, man. I just, he's so exciting. He brings this personality that everyone loves. Of course, Barstool noticed that and already has him on the books. He is one of their, I guess, representatives or whatever you want to call it.
Paul Molly, too.
Yeah. But like you said, man, I mean, I don't think Paddy is known for the knockout, right? I mean, he has that submission game in his back pocket. But, man, watch that interview, and I know you watch it too, and, he's saying, he's like, I'm not going to take him down. I'm going to knock his head off, And, I just feel like he's that guy that, performing in front of the fans, he stays true to his word. I think if anything, maybe Levitt gets the takedown, and maybe Paddy reverses it to a submission. But I think that this is going to be more of a striking affair. But for the record, I want to talk about Jordan Levitt real quick, because a lot of people are saying, oh, man, Jordan Levitt, he's a can. This man isn't a can.
Who's saying that?
This man isn't a can. People on MMA Twitter, I was on a few spaces, they're saying, hey, they're just throwing him a bone. And Jordan Levitt is not a bone. Like, when you watch this man fight, one thing that I love about him, he's very smart. He's very smart.
Yeah.
Like, he's got a brain on his shoulders. And 10-1 is absolutely no joke. And with that, he has a submission game of his own, man. He has a great technique, and he just finds a way to be crafty on the mat. 3-1 in the UFC. I mean, come on, this guy is. He's going to be a journeyman in the UFC, right? I mean, he's not going to be a contender, but, to say that he's a can is no way true. I firmly believe that in, say, 24 months from now, we'll still see Jordan Levitt on the roster. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And to your point about him not being a can, when I saw this fight announced, I was surprised, because I was like, they're giving Paddy Pimblett Jordan Levitt. I was like, okay, that's an actual test. So it's funny to hear people saying that he's a can.
No, 100%. I mean, look, Paddy is technically going to be the lengthier guy. He does have 2 inches in reach there. And, I think that it's going to be Levitt that's going to initiate the grappling exchanges, if it's going to be there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I don't foresee Paddy, shooting a takedown. It's just going to be guns blazing, right? It's funny, because in Paddy's previous 2 fights, he's taken down in the first 3 seconds. So, who knows if we'll see that again. But, I don't think that this is going to be a walk in the park for Paddy per se. I just feel as though that, like, with that energy in the arena, God, it feels like Paddy's a lot. Like, I can't imagine Paddy taking this out in the O2. Like, can you imagine, like, I'm looking myself in the future, like on Saturday, like, can we see Jordan Levitt's hand being raised in this spot? Like, I understand what Jordan brings to the table, and I understand that, he is no slouch. But it's in the O2. Like, it's really tough for me to envision that, man. And, Paddy's going to want to put on a show, right? He's going to want to put on a show, right? Out of his 18 wins, 14 inside the distance. So, he finds a way to, not take it to the judge's scorecard. And, we did see flashes, in his fights of, that he can land those combinations in a blitz. And, if he lands a few 2 or 3, 4 clean, he could just finish it on the ground and pound it out. Obviously Paddy doesn't have that, one knockout punch, but if he can land, 3, 4 solid, combination strikes, maybe Jordan gets dropped and it finishes on the ground. So, you do worry about that club and sub, but I really like Paddy by knockout. I feel as though that he's going to find that button at some point. I see what you're saying about that over. God, that's a ballsy play, in the O2 with Paddy. But hey, you already know that the public's going to be under on that under. So you know what that means. You just got to read between those lines. And, we're here to be profitable long term, and we are. So, I totally see your point, and being on that island by yourself there. And I don't necessarily hate the look. And again, we haven't seen Pimblett late in that third, particularly in the UFC. Or even the second, right? So, maybe if Paddy can't put Jordan away in the first, 7.5 minutes, maybe we see him fade and Levitt, starts landing those takedowns, starts showing that dominance in the grappling department. So, going to be super fun. Felt like Levitt is kind of awkward on the stage when they did the stare off, but I just feel like that's his personality. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, it's definitely awkward.
Yeah, so this is gonna be so awesome, man, and I can't wait for those first 10 seconds after the fight. What's the reaction gonna be? Is it gonna be Levitt twerking over Pimblett, or twerking?
That'll be something.
After the decision win, or is it going to be Pimblett teabagging Levitt like he said he was going to do, like he was doing in Modern Warfare 2? Personally, I was doing that in Call of Duty 4. That just tells you how young Paddy Pimblett is.
Yeah, right. I was doing that, yeah, on the first Modern Warfare.
yeah, exactly. Call of Duty 4, man, good times. But
or even Halo.
Yeah. So, man, this is so entertaining. Honestly, I wish this was the co-main event, but who cares? This is going to be so fun. Cannot wait. And man, that O2 is just going to be so rocking.
Yeah, and just to back up my point, it's also going to be a little bit of a counter to your point as well. I mean, in both of Levitt's matches in the UFC, where he faced guys who were dominant grapplers like himself, and like I mentioned, Trey Ogden, Claudio Puelles, both those fights went to decision, right? Like it was hard. They kind of neutralized out each other's submission games because both guys were so good in there. And I think, like I mentioned before, it's very similar here. And if the only finish is going to be a Paddy knockout, well, of his last 8 fights, only 2 of them have been won by knockout on the Paddy side. And if you stretch it out a little further, over his last 13 fights, only 3 have been won by knockout. So they're implying with the plus 200 odds of a knockout that it happens a third of the time. When we see in his last 8 fights, it's only 25% of the time. And then we extrapolate it over 13 fights, it's even less than that. So it's just, I struggle with seeing how that one, obviously it's possible, right? I mean, we've seen the wild man of Paddy Pimblett in there. Anything's possible in that octagon. But we've also seen him get taken down. We've seen him, 2 fights before he got into the UFC, he lost a decision to Soren Bach. 2 fights before that, he lost another decision. So, it's not like Paddy's never gone to decision. Like everything's a first round finish for him. Yes, he has a lot of those on his record. But, you got to take into account this and that, the first UFC debut, obviously a softball. The second one you could argue was a softball as well with Kazula Vargas. And he found himself a little bit of trouble there. I mean, he shot a desperation takedown very early in that fight. So, I just think I think I'm onto something with this over 1.5. I'm waiting for the Twitter spaces for the light bulb to go off in your head, and then you're going to send it in for like 3 units, and then we're going to cash out on it. So I'm holding out to a little bit of hope on that one. But yeah, I think it's going to be a good fight. It's going to be a lot closer than people think. At least I think so. There's always a chance that Sunday rolls around and Paddy has like another first round dominant win, and we're like, okay, it's time to take him serious a little bit. So it's beauty of the sport, right?
Absolutely. It's going to be just bonkers, man. I mean, because you just know that Paddy's going to have that look in his eye right before that bell starts, and the moment that thing rings, he's just going to go boink 0 to 100 real quick.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And the beauty of this main card in particular is that you could make a real argument for everyone to win in every single fight, right? Maybe put Hannah Goldie aside a little bit. I think there's room for like a little bit of an argument there, but for the most part, you're looking at these fights, Paul Craig, Volkan Oezdemir, right? Argument on both sides, strong arguments on both sides. Mm-hmm. You look at Krillov versus Gustafson, right? We were just arguing about that. We don't know which side's going to win there. You look at the one we just mentioned with Paddy Pimblett and Jordan Levitt. Like, a lot of people think Paddy Pimblett's going to win, but there's a realistic chance, that Jordan Levitt could come out on top here. I think that it's, greater than 33%, what the implied odds are telling us. I think that, maybe even closer to like 40% of the time he could win this matchup. So that's a great one. And then I think the biggest coin flip of them all, next to the main event, is this upcoming co-main here with Jack Hermanson taking on Chris Curtis on short notice, who's filling in for the hometown boy, Darren Till. Apparently Darren Till's going to be in his corner. Same with Brandon Loughnane. So he's going to have some of that English love on his side, Chris Curtis, which is always, great to have in the O2. But he doesn't have an easy matchup. This guy, Jack Hermanson, top 10 guy, been in the top 10 for a long time. Pretty one-dimensional guy, right? He wants to wrestle. He wants to grapple. Not necessarily a power puncher. Doesn't have great combinations on the feet. But what he does do is he sets his takedowns up well. He'll attack body lock takedowns. He'll attack single legs. He'll attack double legs. All different from Chris Curtis's last opponent, Rodolfo Vieira, who a lot of people are saying, if that's what we saw from Curtis against Vieira, he stuffed 20 takedowns. Obviously, we could copy and paste that against Jack Hermanson. But I think it's so different. The way that they both attack takedowns, the way that they both have developed their overall game, it's like comparing apples to oranges for the most part, just because they both like to grapple, right? But Vieira is a jiu-jitsu player. He's not a wrestler. So when you get those pure jiu-jitsu guys in the UFC, their main struggle is, how do I get this guy to the ground unless they follow me into my guard? Whereas Hermansson, he's a freestyle wrestler. He's a folk wrestler. He's looking to, like I mentioned, he has an arsenal of takedowns that he can hit you with. And someone that Chris Curtis fought 4 weeks ago, I think it's his, fourth fight in like 8 months, I said the other day. So it's kind of got that Andre Fiallo feel a little bit. I hate to compare because there is, where there's correlation does not necessarily imply causation, right? So, you could draw similarities between the two, but one has nothing to do with the next. If you flip a coin 10 times it's heads, that doesn't mean the 11th time is going to be tails. So I'm not going to try to draw those two together, but I can't help but think of it. My tiny pea brain just has to think of Andre Fiallo when I think of Chris Curtis. And in this situation, going overseas, short notice, second fight in less than a month, fourth fight in 8 months, that body takes a toll. It's another weight cut. He's fighting another wrestler. He didn't take a lot of shots in his last fight, but defending 20 takedowns, that's a long, long night at the office. That takes a toll on the body. I know he was complaining about his ribs being sore. He felt like he got hit by a truck the next day. But, he does have positives on his side. I mean, he trains with Sean Strickland, right? He spent an entire fight camp, as he said, being Jack Hermansson, because he's the main training partner of Sean Strickland, who just fought Jack back in February. So Chris Curtis is very familiar with his opponent here. I think he could take a lot from his last training camp against Vieira. I think that's where you could draw some similarities, because he did practice and drill takedown defense the entire time. So I do think some of that carries over to this one. At 35 years old, it's a toll on the body, man, fighting that many times, now going overseas on short notice against a top 10 guy in Hermansson. But this guy beat Phil Hawes. This guy beat Brendan Allen. This guy just beat Rodolfo Vieira. So he's doing everything he's being asked to do. You could see, the evolution in his game from when he fought in PFL, right? From when he was, losing to Magomed over there, when he was losing to Ray Cooper over there. He's not the same guy, not by any means. And I think, in a fight that's going to take place within a close distance, I really think that this one's not going to be, at distance for the most part, like some of these other fights. Nobody in that division, I think, works the body better than Chris Curtis does. This guy is like an animal. He's got such pure boxing within the pocket, the way he works the body. He'll hit you up top as well. He'll defend your takedowns, but it just comes back to, can he do it again? Can he do it again in this short of a turnaround against this caliber of opponent? And, I want to fade him here so badly. I've been talking about it all week long. This is a fade spot because, I was getting my haircut yesterday. My barber asked me, how do you go through picks? How do you know which guys to pick? I said, well, there's so many different ways you can go about it, right? It could be whether you have very good lean on this guy, what his strengths are. It could be a stylistic matchup where that this style is going to, paste over better than this one. I said, or it could just be a fade on a certain fighter in a certain spot. And I said, for example, Chris Curtis this weekend is one of those guys where you want to fade him in this spot. It's not necessarily saying I think Jack wins here. It's just I think that, we're not going to see the best version of Chris Curtis. I don't think he wins for XYZ. So I find myself leaning on that a little bit here. And that's where it gets a little bit more dangerous, right? Because you could fade fighters based off things that, you're highlighting on too much, but they might not mean that much in the grand scheme of things. So I feel like I'm saying a whole lot without saying nothing right now, but where it comes down to, I think that if Chris Curtis could stuff these takedowns like he showed in his last fight, it's going to be a long night at the office for Jack Hermansson. I think that Chris Curtis could hurt Hermansson, whether it be to the body or up top. I mean, we saw him knock out Brendan Allen. We saw him knock out Phil Hawes. So he's got the power in his hands, but on the Jack Hermansson side, if he gets on top of you, I think it's over.
It's funny you bring up Andre Fiallo, right? It's only coincidence that Chris Curtis knocked him out in the PFL, right?
Exactly. Their trajectories go like this.
And what's even more wild is Chris Curtis fought Bilal Muhammad in the welterweight division way back in the regional scene. Like, that's wild to me. You know what I'm saying? Man, like Chris Curtis, dude, 37 mixed martial arts fights. That's nutty. Obviously coming in on short notice, which this is going to be a tough task. Like I hear, he trains with this guy and that guy, but man, like, to go all 3 rounds 4 weeks ago, to get the call, 2.5 weeks ago that, hey, you got to come on, fly over across the pond to fight Jack Hermansson. this is a very, very tough task for Chris Curtis. You know, I very much so respect that power. And you said it best his last time out, Matt. The way he worked that body with his hands, thing of beauty. And if he can get that going, if he can get into that groove, it's really going to wear on the gas tank of Hermansson. But what I can say about Hermansson, man, is you already know that when it's in that third round, that man is a machine. He's still going to be landing those takedowns. He's still going to be attempting those, you know, those shots. And, you know, watching that fight versus Edmund Shabazian, that was a perfect example of that. I mean, 10-8 round third, just completely beat the snot out of him. And, you know, one thing that I love about Hermansson is when he takes you down, he stays busy. You know, he's not going to give you the Bilal Muhammad treatment, right? You know, he's looking to inflict damage, right? Those elbows, those fists, you know, waiting for Curtis to maybe turn his back and find that submission. You know, Hermansson has really good grappling on the ground, and you know, I just love his intensity, right? He's going to have a 3-inch reach in this spot. He's going to be the lengthier guy, and I think he's very smart. I really do. I think he's got a good IQ on the head of his shoulders, and you know, I think that the takedown should be there. He knows. You know, he knows where he wants this fight. You know, if Hermansson wants to fight Chris Curtis's fight, stand on the feet for 15 minutes, he's gonna lose, right? He's gonna lose. The biggest question here is if Hermansson can land that takedown. And you know, if he is, he should be able to get the job done. But you know, it's just really tough to get behind a late replacement guy. You know, I think it'd be one thing if this is in Vegas. I really do. But going across a pond, like in that crowd, I get, like, you know, Darren Till is in that corner. I mean, it'll be really interesting. I guess it's more neutral, but yeah, this is a big fade for me. It's just one of those coin flips, like you said, Matt. There's just no edge. I'm glad that we're both on that same page, and there's no reason to force anything, right? You know, when you have, you know, a card of mixed martial arts, there's multiple fights, right? There's 10+ fights every week, so it's like, why get cute and flip a coin and choose a side, right? We're trying to do this to find profit long term, and you know, to choose a side in this spot, it's I really feel like you're just taking a 50-50 coin flip, which the line indicates. So, you know, could we see a Chris Curtis knockout? Absolutely. You know, Hermansson has been knocked out in the UFC before. But could we see Hermansson, you know, find success in the takedown and wear on that Curtis gas tank? Absolutely as well. But, you know, in Curtis's defense, you know, in his last fight out versus Vieira, I mean, he landed 46 significant strikes in that third round. So you already know that he's gonna bring that intensity from bell to bell along with Hermansson. But again, if Hermansson can lay on, you know, Curtis and rack up that control time and, you know, just chip away at that gas tank, man, Hermansson could potentially take over. But, you know, again, this is a big fade for me. It should be a really fun fight. You know, Hermansson, number 8 in the world. You know, Curtis should hopefully crack that, you know, that rankings with a big win here, which I'm sure he would. But yeah, I would say my official pick is Hermansson, just because I feel as though he's a little bit more well-rounded from top to bottom in the mixed martial arts octagon. But you can't count out Chris Curtis, man. I mean, he's been around the block. Of course, he's made an incredible splash in the UFC, going 3-0. And this is a massive spot for him, man. If he knocks out Jack Hermansson in the UFC, might be time to take Curtis serious. And time is running out with him, right? You said it, 35 years old. This is now or never for him.
And I don't even think it has to be a knockout, right? I think even if he could just get his hand raised against Jack Hermansson in this spot on short notice, like we mentioned, you know, that propels him into the top 10. I think easily propels him. I mean, just look at the wins on his record. But when you're looking at what's likelier to occur, I think gun to my head, I'm telling you Jack Hermansson wins this one, right? He's only been knocked out twice throughout his entire career. And, you know, if you're looking back, the guy hasn't lost back-to-back fights since his 6th and 7th fights professionally back in 2012, 2013. The guy's fought 29 times professionally, and all the other, you know, 5 times he's lost, he's come back and he's won. And I point that out because that's an important trend, I think, when you're looking at these UFC fights. You know, how do you bounce back mentally? And it was actually a stat I brought up last week in terms of Li Jingliang, the Leech, because I mentioned that in all 6 of his professional losses, he came back and he won. And then sure enough, we saw a great version of the Leech on last Saturday. He got the knockout in the 2nd round. So, you know, I think there's something to take away from that. I think it's more likely we see Hermansson land the takedowns and, you know, get his ground and pound off, work a submission than it is that Chris Curtis lands a knockout here. I'm not sure what the exact odds are of Hermansson decision. Curtis knockout, but I have to imagine that the Hermansson decision odds might be a little bit better. And if they're wider than the Chris Curtis line, I think you have to take it. I'm going to pull it up now. Plus 250 for decision by Hermansson, plus 240 for knockout by Curtis. So right where it should be, right? I think that's a good number on Hermansson by decision, plus 250. Curtis is a tough guy. And just one more thing I want to point out about Curtis's last opponent. Vieira, same height as Chris Curtis, 73-inch reach. Hermansson, 77-inch reach. He's got like 2 or 3 inches on Curtis. So, it's a lot easier to land those takedowns when you have more room to reach and grab the legs. So just want to throw that one out there. But, you and I are in the same boat. Probably not going to bet this one. I lean Hermansson in this one if you're going to take any knowledge away from this synopsis. I don't know about you, but that's what I have to add to this.
Split decision 6-1.
Is it 6-1?
It is.
That's interesting.
On DK. Yeah, I would personally have it like that's what I'm saying. Like in 2022, obviously the split decision prop has come is more accurate, right, than what it was in the past, right? People were, or I guess the bookmakers were catching on, right, to that split decision prop. But I think 6-1 there could potentially be value, right, where you have that grappler who's going to attempt those takedowns, and we see time and time again where you have that first half of the round where he gets a takedown, then Curtis will have the power to get back up. Maybe Curtis has the striking advantage. Could be a little dabble if or when I should say we're having a good night. So I don't know. I was looking at that. Just looking at that, I was like, I
mean, this is the type of matchup you wanted in, right? Striker grappler. Some could stuff take this, some could land strikes. They land their own strikes. So it's 6-1's a good number there. We're normally seeing it at like 3.5 to 1, 4 to 1 these days. So 6-1 on any fight to go split decision, especially a 3-rounder. 3-rounders, that's where you're going to get the most, hearsay from the judges. So
yeah, and on top of that, it's not like we have an England fighter versus versus an American without Darren Till in their corner, right? So I don't think that either guy's going to have that advantage, or that bias, I should say, when it comes to judging. Which, in reality, you think about that. Why is that even a thing? Right? Like these judges have a job to judge a fight, but that's just what we're dealing with in the UFC, man.
Got to take everything into account.
Right. So yeah, that 6-1 is really appealing to me. I'm definitely going to be intrigued by that when we're deep into this card, making it rain with the hospital gifts in the Discord.
Yeah, exactly. And, before we get into this main event, right? This Curtis Blaydes, Tom Aspinall main event, you guys got to check out KOD Media.
Yes, sir. as a pure Baltimorean, man, gosh, that hurts to see that Yankee bomb, but hey, they're dominating in the MLB. So,
hey, regardless of your feelings, make sure you like and subscribe the channel, KOD Media, Knights of Degen. You got to get all this content, especially Fight Night. When we drop a new episode, you're going to get alerted of it. It's going to be right there on your homepage. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter. All that's going to be in the description below. So make sure you do all that. It helps us out, helps our guy Jig out who works so hard behind the scenes. But, enough of that. Let's get into this Fight Night main event. I know you guys have heard me before. I complain a lot about heavyweight main events. This isn't one I'm going to complain about. This is one I am fucking excited for. I can't wait for this fight. Curtis Blaydes, first time in his UFC career. Yes, out of all those fights, he's fought Francis Ngannou twice. He fought Derek Lewis, Alistair Overeem, Junior Dos Santos, all these names. And it is Tom Aspinall who's going to be the first person to be the favorite against him in this matchup. Aspinall minus 140. The comeback on Curtis Blaydes plus 120. I feel very strongly about this one, as I think you do too, Kev, right? So, I'm going to let you take the ball on this one first, and then I'll do my best part to counter you.
Oh, counter. Okay. I think we know where we're going then.
I think I know you're on the opposite side of me. That's why.
Yeah. What I'm going to say is that you're telling me that you're going to fade Aspinall again, because I know you were on Volkov last time.
I know. Don't bring it up.
I know, right? Look, for the record, look, let's talk about Curtis Blaydes, man. This man has truly revolutionized this division in the UFC, right? I mean, the aspect of wrestling that he's brought to the table, averaging 6 takedowns per 15 in this heavyweight division is mind-boggling, right? I mean, it's a technique that you just don't see at this weight. It's kind of like when you have like a tiny weight division with that one-punch knockout. You know what I'm saying? It's this that revolutionary technique that Blaydes brings to the table. And look, Blaydes, I have so much respect. He's paid his dues. He's paid his dues, man. He's been around the block. I mean, you're talking about fighting, some of the best in the world. Obviously the Black Beast and Ngannou and Volkov, and the list goes on. And of course, he's going to have this 2-inch reach advantage here. And oh boy, Tom Aspinall, man, 5-0 in the UFC. Has this composure about him that you just love to see, man. He stays so comfortable, so content under pressure, just knows where to be at the right time. And you can even say that Aspinall is maybe not that individual that revolutionized the sport, but he's a part of that group of up and coming heavyweights that is revolutionizing the sport in regard to that athleticism. That way he moves like a middleweight. It's a thing of beauty. He's so athletic. He's so agile. He stays so evasive too. And this man has wrestling of his own, right? This man is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? I mean, we talk about the Blaydes wrestling, but hey, the setups that Aspinall has shown in the UFC, that approach to that takedown is beautiful, right? Like that, like who in the living world shoots on drawing a blank, Arlovsky, right? Submits him in 3 seconds. Arlovsky is a former champion, but I mean, he's a legend of the sport. I mean, he's been around forever. And like literally no one has ever done that before. No one has ever like bullied Volkov the way that Aspinall has done. I see the idea, okay, well, Aspinall hasn't, fought that great of competition. He doesn't have that amount of experience in the UFC and that amount of talent that he's fought as Blaydes. But, look, he went into those 5 fights in the UFC that he's had. He did what he had to do. He had an A+ performance. And, I feel as though that Aspinall knows what's coming. He knows what is Blaydes' game. And I just have this feeling. That Aspinall is going to shoot that first takedown and he's going to take Blaydes down. Because I think that Blaydes is going to be so he's going to have those hands and then he's going to think about that takedown. But is he thinking about in his mind of that takedown defense? And I don't know. I just think that Aspinall is just has it, man. He has it. I love the technique. I just love everything about this man. And this is just going to be such a great fight, man. Of course, it's in England, which is a very, very tough test for Blades to go across the pond. And, of course, training out of in Colorado, I believe. But man, I just, that energy, Aspinall already has had a main event in this arena. I just think that all the pieces are turning towards Aspinall in this spot. I love Blades and what he's brought to the UFC, but this is an extraordinarily tough task for him. I just think that Aspinall is so unique and crafty, and he's just going to find a way to put Blades out. What are your thoughts, Matt?
I think it's a tough matchup for both guys, right? I mean, I think it's kind of disrespectful to say that Aspinall is a tough matchup for Blades, just considering who he's fought throughout his UFC career. I mean, he's been in the promotion for 6 years, right? And he's fought absolutely everyone at the top of the food chain there. And, not for nothing, there's only 3 losses, 2 of them against Ngannou, right? And the one was against that beautiful time shot by Derek Lewis, obviously Derek Lewis landed the shot, sent him to the shadow realm, right? But it's a fight that he was winning. He would have continued to dominate and win, but the shot did land, so you can't take anything away from that. But does Aspinall have that power? No. Is Aspinall faster than anyone he's faced? Yes, definitely. I think Aspinall, the one thing he brings to the table that scares me as a Blades backer is that speed, right? And we've seen, Blades get caught with some stuff on the feet, but I wouldn't be surprised if, Blades keeps this one standing a little longer than many think, which, lends some credit to your point about Aspinall being the one shooting the first takedown. I don't hate that because, obviously we saw it in Blades' last fight versus Daukaus. Daukaus is in a completely different tier of fighter than Aspinall, obviously, but he was content standing that whole time to show the world, I can strike. I'm not just one-dimensional. I'm not just a wrestler. And I think he wanted to show that to himself, too, a little bit, right? This guy in Daukaus knocking out everybody in the division until he got stopped by Lewis, and now he fights Curtis Blades. He gets stopped there, and that was some knockout. It was some punch. You could hear the punch crack, and then Daukaus had no clue where he was, and then Blades was on top of him like that. I just think Blades is continuing to evolve. The guy's only 31 years old, right? He's fought 14 times in the UFC in the last 6 years. So This guy is getting that experience in. I know I tweeted this out. Total octagon time. It's laughable in this matchup, right? I mean, Curtis Blades has, let me pull it up, 133 minutes and 32 seconds of octagon time. That's just in the UFC. Tom Aspinall has less than a full 3-round fight at 14 minutes and 44 seconds. And that is just such a discrepancy in, experience coming into this one. And you mentioned it before, and I agree. You can't knock Aspinall for his level of competition and how quickly he's gotten rid of them because he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do in those situations, right? You can't ask anything more of a fighter, in those situations to get those 3-minute finishes, to get those, first round finishes. One of his fights went to the second round and he ended it whenever he decided to end it, right? Like you said, he said, why not just take him down and submit him, right? Take 5 seconds. So it's such an interesting matchup because nobody wrestles like Curtis Blades. Yeah. Tom Aspinall could be a good wrestler, right? He hasn't shown it against the elites. It's not his fault, but it's more so just a bump to Curtis Blades. This guy is landing 6 takedowns per 15 minutes. And the names he's been fighting. He's not fighting, Andrei Arlovsky. He's not fighting Sergey Spivak. He's not fighting Jake Collier. Like, he's fighting dogs like that are, top of the food chain here, the scariest humans in the world he's doing this to. And he lands those takedowns at a 53% clip. So, if he's shooting in half the time, he's going to get the takedown and get on top of you. And you do not want Curtis Blades on top of you. They call him razor blades for a reason. Those elbows from the top are damaging. And, someone like Tom Aspinall, we've never really seen him get clipped or cut or hurt. And, you could draw some similarities. I guess like the most recent one that comes to mind is like a Khamzat Chimaev, right? We never saw him in any sort of danger until that Burns fight. And there was some area for concern for Khamzat in that Burns fight. And once he got dropped for the first time, he got cut up a little bit. He had to make that decision. Like, is this what I am? Like, is this what I'm going to do? And he did, but he squeaked away. If that fight went a little longer, I don't know if that result is the same. And we have a 5-rounder on our hands here with Blades and Aspinall. I just think at 31 years old, this guy Curtis Blades, he's really good. I really think that he's fighter 1A in that division. I think he beats Cyril Gane if they fight each other. And I think Cyril Gane is, also right up there in the top of the division. He should have beaten Francis Ngannou, right? And Francis Ngannou somehow wrestled to a victory in that one. But Curtis Blaydes, I can't say enough about him. He's got power. He's got wrestling. He's got great top control. I think off the bottom, he's going to be able to get up if Aspinall takes him down as well. What concerns me on Aspinall, as I mentioned before, is that speed. He throws elbows of his own, which are deadly. They're going to damage and slice you up if he catches you with them. He has a relentless pace. And, I mentioned this to you earlier in the week. It's going to be interesting if this goes past the first round, if this goes past the second round. Can that style extrapolate over 5 rounds, which is the big question here, right? And you know me, I hate questions. I don't want unknowns. I want to know exactly what's going to happen. So Tom Aspinall, we've seen him fight, I think, at most like 7 minutes in the octagon in non-grapple heavy affairs where he has a 260-pound man initiating the clinch against him. So it's going to be very interesting. We know Curtis Blaydes could go 5 rounds. We know he could wrestle for 5 rounds. He's not going to slow down. He trains up in Colorado, that elevation fight team, wherever he's at. His cardio is going to be on point. So Tom Aspinall, it's a little worrisome if this one goes into deeper waters. How exactly is he going to look? How is his fight style going to change or remain the same in that 3rd round, in that 4th round? If it goes to the 5th round, how is that going to look? Whereas we have the answers for Curtis Blaydes, right? And there's just so much, I think, on my side going for Curtis Blaydes where it's like at plus 120 where it is now, it's like, come on, you got to take a chance on this guy with this much experience fighting that high level of guys and dominating everybody. Other than Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis, he's dominated everybody. And the only 2 things those guys have in common is their ridiculous power, which Tom Aspinall does not possess. But I'm not to say Tom Aspinall can't get it done. I think he very well could get it done. I think there's, like I said, too many questions to be able to say that he can't get it done. But in terms of where this fight goes, can Aspinall take Blaydes down? Yeah, I think so. Can he hold him down? I don't think so. I don't think he can get the submission either. Curtis Blaydes is a strong, strong man. And, I just don't necessarily see, conviction in playing the Aspinall side here, if that makes sense. I know I sent you earlier in the week. I had put my money down on Curtis Blaydes at plus 15. That line moved down to plus 110. Came back up to plus 115. I cashed out my bet. So I said, this line's going to get a little bigger. Sure enough, right now it's sitting at plus 120. So there's going to be room, I think, for this line to grow a little bit more. I think there's a chance we get Curtis Blaydes like plus 135. I really do think so. There's a lot of money coming on Aspinall, a lot of people confident in him, and rightfully so. Like we mentioned, he's done everything they've asked of him. He's a killer. He made Volkov look like, Parker Porter out there. So it's an interesting fight, and it lends to what we said earlier, how all these fights in the main card could go either way, and this is definitely, at the pinnacle of that.
No doubt about it. Man, I was watching that Derek Lewis fight and for versus Blaydes, and man, the Black Beast stuffed 3 takedowns. Blaydes couldn't take him down. Yeah, man, I don't know. This is such a fun match. There's just something about Aspinall I love. I just love. He just has so many tools in his pocket. Having that black belt. I just think that people are really, really overlooking that work on the mat. And this line movement is very, very interesting to me because I get this gist on MMA Twitter that like everyone loves Curtis Blaydes. Oh, first underdog in the UFC. I don't know. I've been on multiple spaces this weekend, and everyone loves Blaydes here. But the line isn't indicating that. So clearly people are putting more money on Aspinall, right? So, this is going to be so incredibly fun. I think I said this earlier. I really wouldn't be surprised if this is going to be crazy, but I think I wouldn't be surprised if this goes to a decision. Like, I know both guys are so dangerous, but I think both guys really respect what their opponent is bringing to the table.
I agree with that.
You know what I'm saying? But prediction, 3rd round, club and sub, Aspinall.
Hey, definitely possible. I think I'm with you a little bit that this one could go the distance. I think both guys are going to be very respectful of the others, weapons that they have at their disposal. And, as I mentioned before, we haven't seen Aspinall out of the 2nd round. So once it gets into those later rounds, is he going to slow down? Is there going to be finishing capability on his side? I'm sure he'll be able to defend himself, but these questions lead you, maybe you could take a stab at this one going the distance at plus 215, right? Maybe you could take some alternate overs. You could take over 2.5 minus 120, take the over 3.5 at plus 150. There's different ways you could play this one. If you want to get, if you overnight grow the biggest pair of balls and you want to ladder the over in this fight, over 1.5, over 2.5, over 3.5, over 4.5 fight to go the distance, you could be a very rich man come Sunday morning, but it's definitely a side. I don't know if I'm going to want to play that. I think I have, I think I'm a little bit too scared,
Yeah, it's just one of those things, right? Like Aspinall's cardio is such an unknown, there's no doubt that he has the work ethic, right? Like he's putting in the time and effort, but like we just don't know what we're going to see in those later rounds. And it's like, if both guys stay safe in those first 3 rounds, I mean, we could see a very sluggy final 10 minutes where just either guy can truly find the finish. So, yeah, again, I have this envision, man, that Aspinall is just going to work Blades' game. Like he's going to shoot that first takedown, Blades is going to throw that wide hook. Aspinall is going to shoot and take him down. And I think Blades should be able to get back up there. But, Aspinall is just so crafty. You just have to be very, very careful with those movements on getting up, because I think we can all agree that Blades has a non-existent submission game, right? Like if he takes his opponent to the ground, it's all about that GNP, ground and pound. So with Aspinall, there's just more tools on the ground there. But yeah, this is so fun. I just there's nothing like an event at the O2, right? There's just a different feeling about it. There's a different energy, even just watching the fight. It's lovely. It's a lovely sight to see. Those English MMA fans across the pond are bonkers. So I think we're going to see a lot of fighters, have that win, and as on their walkout, you're going to see a lot of those fans handing them a shoey or some sort of imagination. But
that's London for you.
Yeah, man. But man, I cannot wait. Of course, you dropped a bomb of a conviction, which I don't want to bring up on this video, but definitely check out our Twitter. If you're watching this and you're not in the KOD Discord, that's a place to be, guys. I mean, we're dropping so much great alpha. We're here to provide the people with that moolah, man. And we've seen over the last few months, since tracking that, we've found success, and we're going to continue to build on top of that. Not get too high on our highs, low on our lows, and just do the dirty work and allow people to make it rain with us. So happy to do it, and happy to do this with you, Matt. Sorry to miss Dan on this show, but I'm sure he'll be back next week. We will hopefully have a special guest next week from MMA Twitter, which I'm super excited about. First guest on this show. So going to be a great card next week too with UFC 277. But man, always a pleasure, Matt, breaking down these fights with you. And can't wait to be lighting it up in the Discord with you.
Mandy Bomb minus 130.
There it is. Down to minus